Welcome everyone to another open source Linux live stream here. People asked me to comment on the RedHat source code release situation. Wasn't the most interested in that, but the community asked, here I comment. So what happened is that RedHat a week or so ago announced furthering the evolution of CentOS streams, with which they mean further restricting the availability of RedHat sources. For more than 2 years ago, they write here, RedHat introduced CentOS streams as a focal point of collaboration around Red Hat Enterprise Linux, RHEL. CentOS streams shortened the feedback window, they say there, yada yada, blah blah blah. As a CentOS, so because it's much rapid excellence, blah blah blah, and so on, they're the best. As CentOS stream community grows and the enterprise software world tackles new dynamics, aka we are in trouble, we want to sharpen our focus on CentOS streams as the backbone of enterprise Linux innovation. They are continuing their investment in an increasing commitment to CentOS streams. CentOS streams will now be the sole repository for public RHEL related source code releases. So what they're saying, they put here a positive spin here, as the usual marketing speak, right? Everything is amazing, innovation, innovation, innovation. And in reality, what they phrase here so nicely in marketing speech is they further limit availability of Red Hat Enterprise Linux sources. Those Red Hat customers and partner source code will remain available via the Red Hat customer portal, aka not publicly, right? So you need a license, support subscription, and so on. While making this change before CentOS streams, Red Hat pushed public sources for Red Hat Enterprise Linux to git CentOS.org. When the CentOS product shifted to center on CentOS streams, they maintained these repositories even though CentOS Linux was no longer being built downstream of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. The engagement around CentOS streams, the engineering level of investment, and new priorities, aka they need to make money, addressing for customers and partners now make maintaining separate, redundant, and repositories inefficient. The latest source code will still be available via CentOS streams. Red Hat customers partners can access Red Hat Enterprise Linux sources via the customer and partner portals in accordance to their subscription agreements, aka what we are struggling with, right? The whole community, every open source developer struggles. I made a couple of videos, and also, hey, why did I not live stream much the last 14 days? I focused on work and earned some money, right? At some bank account was running low, invoices to pay. Actually, unsuccessful YouTuber finally needs to get his ass up and get some work done. Exact code profits 158% up in just 8 days, yay. Anyway, so similar to us, Red Hat needs to earn money to pay all their developers, and so they limit this. So my take on this, it's a huge controversy, right? Everyone, and probably Linus Torvalds commented on this in Reddit, except it's down in Percol and stuff. So my take on this, right? In my opinion, Red Hat continues to ruin their reputation. They could have been the good guys. They probably started similar to Google. Let's not do evil and stuff. The red-headed, aka I think they started as this red-headed Linux guy doing the Linux support and stuff. So probably the story, all the red stuff, as far as I remember, might be wrong, comment below. Anyway, they could have been the nice guys, right? The flagship in the wild open source C, the number one after our YouTube channel, obviously, the number 2 source to go to if you need Linux distribution and support. But they continue to ruin it, right? It's not the first time. So what I mean with this, right? This is like totally negative, right? So they do this to limit. Why do they do this? They do this, as I said, they need to earn money, but more seriously, they want to hinder competition, right? This is, among other things, all the freeloaders of like, hey, I don't pay for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I do my, like, I refuse to use this crazy German YouTubers T2 Enterprise Linux, tested on open power, and all the good stuff. I want to freeload Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right? So it's about maybe a little bit freeloaders, but also more about the more serious business like Oracle and others who do not run their own Linux distribution like ourselves, but just copy stuff. And in my opinion, in the long term, like in the short term and in the long term, it does next to nothing to Red Hat. Because Oracle will just continue to maintain their broken Linux, right? It's not like Oracle will give up and they will have less customers, right? Maybe Oracle even gets more customers because of all the negativity. So instead of just publishing, so in my opinion, what they should do is they should just, instead of limiting source code availability, which some people cry GPL violations, no, it's not. You only need to ship the source code as whole to your customers and users and stuff. And like if you're not a customer user, you do not, I mean, you can load the kernel from kernel.org, but you don't need to get that specific kernel Red Hat is shipping. For that, you would need to buy it there and then you get the source code. So yeah, it's not GPL violations, but it is a finger to all the open source developers, especially those, like if you work at SUSE or Ubuntu and you work together in a team on kernel.org and stuff, and you want to take, you could just want to quickly take a look what Red Hat is patching there to BSEC, to cross-reference and stuff. It makes everyone's life just harder, right? And in my opinion, it totally ruins Red Hat's reputation. Because instead of positive PR, like, hey, here's just the sources, we are the #1 source, or #2 source, they are now the GPL violations allegedly company, right? And it's not the first thing, right? So first off, there is a huge, like, if you're new to the stuff, I remember, like, so you're getting gray hair and stuff, I'm so old, I remember how many controversies Red Hat had over the past, right? So there's all of the CentOS stuff. If you're new to this stuff, you might wonder, the CentOS is a Red Hat thing. Yeah, actually, CentOS started as a community enterprise operating system, also known as CentOS Linux, is a now discontinued Linux distribution that provided us, 2,000 Linux distributions, right? I kept counting 1,000. I think in the meantime, we are at 2,001 Linux distribution that provided free and open source community supported computing platform functionally compatible with the upstream sources of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, RHEL, in January 2014. So like founded a long time ago, first released May 2004, numbered as CentOS version 2, it's like, 20 freaking years ago, forked off of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right? Since version 8, CentOS, also like, is that a new thing? No, since 20 years there was a community fork because people wanted to just run this Linux. Was forked from Red Hat version 2.1 AS. Since version 8, CentOS officially supports whatever, less than T2 Linux. As of December 2015, Arch releases of CentOS 7 are available in IA32, PowerEiser, ARM7, ARch64, and various ARM architectures, still less than T2 Linux. And the last CentOS 8 was released 24 September 2019. In December 2020, Red Hat also, going back to history, in January 2014, then CentOS announced that they officially joining back Red Hat, right? Like first the community fork, 10 years later, because recurring theme on this channel, maintaining a Linux distribution is actually freaking a lot of work, like basically day and night, and sometimes the weekend and everything in between. And announced joining Red Hat Linux, staying independent, however, from Red Hat Enterprise Linux under a new CentOS governing board, right? So much to, hey, we are getting back together, all the Taylor Swift songs, and then some, and then oops, they did it again. And yes, we love music references here. And first they forked it, then they get it back on the board, and it's like they should have learned from history and kept this positive community spin and not freaking retire it again, right? Because it's freaking continuous, right? Is that all? No, that is not all. You thought, hey, I forked T2 from the Rock Linux that I maintained, and hey, it's only one fork point of the Linux distribution running from 1996. Hey, we only forked once. And maybe that is why it's so amazing, because they fork back and forth, discontinue stuff, and again, because later, where was it? Rocky Linux. On 8th of December, the CentOS project announced that the distribution would be discontinued at the end of 2021 in order to focus on CentOS streams. The community response to this announcement was overwhelmingly negative. Oops, who would have thought? Maybe they need to hire a marketing expert like myself. Soon thereafter, CentOS founder Gregory Kurtzner announced a new project, surprise, surprise, yet another fork, to continue the original CentOS focus, which became known as Rocky Linux. Shame. It is so close to our predecessor Rocky Linux, right? Of all the names they could have chosen, they chosen Rocky Linux. It's like, damn, you had one job. Anyway, created Cloud Linux created Alma Linux to provide a community-supported successor of CentOS Linux, aiming for binary compatibility with the current version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. A better version of Alma Linux was released February 1st, 2021. The first stable release was published March 30, 2021. So, to summarize that, Red Hat, after probably 30 years in existence, we should fact check that, Red Hat Linux. So after 30 years of Red Hat freaking wannabe enterprise Linux, they have still not learned how to run a community, and they continue to ruin their what previously decades ago was perceived as the #1 source for reference Linux, which of course now is T2 Linux, supporting all the T2 CPU architectures. But the Red Hat package manager reference implementation and go-to Linux experts of your trust and choice still don't know what they are doing. And that is really sad for an open source company, because to remind all of you, Red Hat did not found Linux, right? That was Linus Torvalds and all the early adapters, the Free Software Foundation, doing GCC and glibc, and the #1 editor, that is Emacs. But of course the Linux kernel, all the surrounding infrastructure, that is of course overwhelmingly developed by volunteers, by students, by professors, by just hobbyists, by everyone and their kids and family and sometimes a dog. And that is what people forget, right? Red Hat is not writing all of the Linux ecosystem, the Linux operating system, not the kernel, not the C library. They contribute huge parts, right? But they have not even written the X3 server, right? That was also done by hobbyists. Of those people who forgot that initially the X3 86 was derived from other hobbyist X projects, but then became the X3 86 project that then forked to the Xorg Foundation, because the open source community loves over 2,000 Linux distributions and forks of forks of forks and more forks. And sure, they have written some things, but even KVM, like even when they work on major infrastructure components, often they purchase this, right? I think KVM was also largely developed, maybe, as far as I remember, from some Israeli startup, maybe, or comment below. This is all from memory, right? There's of course always some bias, but remember KVM was some maybe student, professor, PhD thesis, Israeli startup or stuff, then purchased by Red Hat, maybe. I probably should Google that, but something of that sort. It's usually something like that. Of course, they do a lot of stuff, paying developers to work on X2, X3, and now X4, on Ceph and other things, but they often don't found stuff. They do not do it alone. Like even if they do a majority of the work, other developers from SUSE, Debian, Ubuntu, T2, Linux, Gentoo, Debian, and so on, and all the volunteers, right? What people always forget, and what always irritated me in previous videos with the Linux Foundation, the Linux Foundation also has so much money, and they give nothing to the community, right? Similar here. They have so much money, just recently being acquired by IBM, probably, as far as I remember. Probably should check that. I think like fact checking. Can't keep an overview of all the things, but yeah, RIS Series 8. IBM has completed transition. Oh, this is something else. Oracle database, IBM United States announcement, and business machines. Here probably. And yeah, they should. So first of all, they do not do all the stuff, right? It is their right to publish their sources. only to their customers. It's not helping the community at scale, at large, and it's putting some poison in the river and sea of the open source ecosystem. And sure, life will go on. For most people, it doesn't even matter, it doesn't care, like Linux kernel patches flow, how they flow. They even put some statements out after all this controversy, of course. RedHat put some statement out, it's like, hey, it's not so bad and it's all the best and everything will be amazing. The usual stuff here, right? Follow up post here on commitment to open source, responses there, changes, spent a lot of time, yada yada, that is his name, vice president, all is good and be assured. But they, again, as I mentioned, probably 3 times by now, they only make themselves enemies and bad PR, and it would not surprise me that overall it's only a loss to them. They lose trust, they lose faith, they lose maybe even customers. Like if you are a CEO, CTO, open source fan and you read all this news, like say you run some data center or stuff, of course you don't switch instantly, right? If you run a data center or a Linus Tech Tips or whatever, float plane and stuff, and you license Red Hat Enterprise Linux or so, if you're not using RT2 Enterprise Linux, and you're not switching overnight, right? Which is obviously why it's so hard to convince people to just use our Enterprise Linux, which, spoiler alert, we just publish all our sources and then some. But eventually they make a choice, right? And like everyone a little bit interested in tech and open source will the next time prioritize someone else, right? And of course, there's also one other controversy. Coming back to Oracle, this is also the wrong one, this is the right one. Coming back to Oracle, it will not even hinder Oracle much, right? It's not like multi-billion-dollar companies it will make a dent to their way to maintain their kernel, right? Where Red Hat says this is due all the freeloading and forks and stuff. Because another controversy, also already 20 years ago, in 2011, controversy again, oops, they did it again in 2011, history repeats itself here, obfuscated the source code release already when Red Hat has changed its way it ships their source code for their Linux kernel. Previously it was released as a standard kernel with a collection of patches, just like our T2 enterprise and carrier grade certificate and probably automotive ready T2 Linux, right? Where we have one of the nicest availability of patches, the easiest to access, nothing hidden, nothing packaged in tarballs and stuff, peel out and source RPMs, it's just all there, and it's freaking version control system since 20 years, long before other Linux distribution used the Linux version control system like CVS back in the days. And they already in 2011 tried to make it harder for freeloaders and copycats like Oracle's broken Linux by just releasing one huge source dump like Apple and Google do with WebKit and Chromium and stuff, instead of this fine-grained set of patches, which are of course much easier to review. Of course it's different when you have all your PS3 or Octane patches and you can go through all of them one by one. Then you have one big dump where you don't know which change, obviously everything interchanges, and then you don't know if it's part of X2 APIC enablement or SGI-O2, PS3 and so on. I mean, obviously you have some stuff in PowerPC and stuff, but stuff accumulates and so on, and obviously any obfuscation makes it harder to work with. So they recurrently do that, right? And that is also why I never used it, right? I never used Red Hat Enterprise Linux once. Maybe I installed it, well, I never used it, I never put it in production, I never had any wish, demand or requirement. I run my own Linux distribution like every other IT professional probably does. And maybe installed it once. It is possible that 15 years ago we had a project and they used Red Hat Enterprise Linux, so maybe I installed it once just to test on the system, but that's it, right? That is how much I use Red Hat Enterprise or any of the other broken Oracle Linux distributions, because everything is just so patched and working nicely on my SGIO2 or P3 with T2 Linux. So yeah, they did this again. At that time, off the record, mentioning people familiar to the matter, reporting here to the age that aiming at Oracle, who like others just repackages Red Hat's source code as the basis of their broken Linux, removing the visibility of information about which patches have or have not been applied, will be difficult for companies like Oracle, who use the patch information so they know what state the Red Hat Linux kernel is in before applying their own patches. Yeah, so again and again, history repeats for me. Red Hat is losing the last credibility when, after 30 years of their existence, they still need to do it. In my opinion, this is not how a not doing evil, well-faced open source company should behave. Of course, we have bigger problems in this industry, which I made a couple of videos about and mentioned every other day along the lines, which is financing of the open source community, where, sure, some big players like Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and others become billionaires with using open source as their base for their data centers and products, like switching their Windows operating system apparently not to increasingly to the Linux kernel, because stability and features and drivers and freeloading and stuff. But this Red Hat stuff is not solving it, right? You're not solving financing open source developers that Red Hat is paying anyway. And interestingly, I made a poll here on my channel, how you finance open source development, and unsurprisingly, just need to click something here, probably that, because it's my second account now. So yeah, if you want to bias this poll, go ahead, poll there. And very, very few of the 83 votes voted, how do you financially support open source developers by licensing license and services from companies like Red Hat and Ubuntu, right? 1%, probably one vote. So donate to non-projects, FSS, Gwank, QEMU, Valgrind, FDO and stuff, donate to individuals, sending patches. I don't, it's free. And of course, some people commented, it's like, hey, I don't have money. I have as little money as you. I need to beg for donations, and I'm still a student and stuff. So yeah, but I make this here to get some feedback, to check my impression of the industry, just some validation or invalidation, and checking my bias here of struggling to make money with open source. And that is a real thing, right? But we are not solving that. So we neither solve this by companies like Red Hat, SUSE, and Ubuntu, because they only pay their employees. I mean, that's of course a good thing, but that's not enough, right? Because it's just like working in a company like Microsoft, Apple, Google, Siemens, Bosch, Mercedes. Like, there's a difference whether if I wanted to work at Apple or Volkswagen, where they wanted me to work, I would be working there, right? Or Siemens or Bosch. Like, but this is not what I wanted, right? I wanted to do innovative stuff and not like sit, like, even if in the meantime I would be manager at Siemens and stuff, like this is not what I wanted, right? Like many other open source developers, we wanted to make a better place, and my vision, like others, was not, you can not make a better place by working a regular 9-to-5 job at, or 9-to-9 job at one of those big companies. So working at these companies does not solve open source funding, because they mostly do their company agenda, right? Of all the thousands of employees that Red Hat has, it's, by the way, fact check that, do they list the employees? Red Hat, where do they have here? Maybe another Red Hat Inc. here of 19,000 employees, right? And I guess 18,000 of them are not doing open source stuff. Like, if 1,000 of them do open source development, that's probably already a very ambitious, positive spin estimate. maybe only hundreds of them do open source development, I don't know. But let's say they do 1,000 open source developers, which is already whopping. But a lot of the stuff is also like developing. It's like not, I mean, they have so much stuff. They have cluster file system, virtualization and stuff. Like, yeah, of course, you need that many developers. But last but not least, with a net income of 434 million in 2008 and a revenue of 3.4 billion, putting that into perspective, they make 3.4 billion and they need to hide their Linux, they need to hide their sources. This is really sad. It's hilarious. It's, as I said already, a very bad marketing move. And I also wonder what those companies are thinking, right? Maybe playing like the C-level executives, playing golf and flying private jet. They've probably so lost touch with reality that golfing and private jet flying, they get the strange ideas of how do we make more money? Hey, we hide our sources. Yay. Let's open some champagne for that. It's like, maybe they are so detached from reality that they think that even has an impact. Because again, I think this has only a negative impact and does next to nothing for nobody. Anyway, that's basically my take. I hope you enjoyed this and learned something from that. Last but not least, we could quickly check the history. 1993, because I said the red-hatted Linux experts. Let's see if that is true. Bob Young, cooperated ACC, catalog business, sold Linux and Unix software. 1994, Mark Ewing created their own Linux distribution. Then RedHat Linux, associated with this time. Red, Cornell University, lacrosse hat. Yay, my memory was kind of right, I hope. Anyway, quick look to the comments. That's basically it. I hope you enjoyed this and learned something. Leave in the comments below what you see. Did you miss random live streams the last weeks? Or should I actually focus on proper business and more professionally edited videos? Yeah, Krummerit, now that you write this there, Samir Khan, Krummerit, that is exactly what I remembered. And where they're from? Israel, as far as I remember. KVM Krummerit. Was an enterprise software offering a desktop virtualization platform based on hosted Linux desktop, hosted desktop in kernel-based virtual machines. KVMS on servers linked with the SPICE protocol. Was also the creator and global sponsor of the KVM open source hypervisor. Founder Benny Schneider in 2005 already and became a Red Hat parent. Was founded 2005 by Benny Schneider and Rami Tamir as president, Bashi Bar as CTO and chairman, Dr. Giora Yaron. Qumranet had raised 20 million in two financing rounds from its founders. Northwest Venture partner Cisco Systems and Sequoia Capital. The company's first product named Solid Ice. There is even very low profile. Yeah, Israeli. From a very low profile Israeli startup, my brain is just working at times too good to remember all those details. Made waves with a rapid acceptance of KVM into the Linux kernel, and their Solid Ice desktop virtualization platform has received serious attention, unlike Red Hat's negative marketing that also receives lots of attention. Comment there, heard it was really a move by IBM, pushed onto Red Hat. I think they don't say that right here. I think they, I mean, this is of course similar to Russia always lying, right? You can always pretend a distorted reality like Steve Jobs and everything's different. So, because they write here, Mike McGrath, Vice President of Core Platform Engineering at Red Hat, been there for 16 years, and before started working there was a volunteer for Fedora project. Open source and all that phrase entails are very important to them. Over the past week, many people say unkind and untrue things about hardworking Red Hatters like them. It's like, yeah, if you don't want, like, pro tip, 101 pro tip, which you can invite me to a private jet. Actually, I'm for our planet environment. I'm not flying private jets. So yeah, I take this back. You can't invite me to a private jet. I'm not Epstein or stuff, or Elon Musk. Pro tip, don't go into private jets. Also not much into golfing, but yeah, you can buy me beer and stuff for some free marketing tips, because if you don't want negative marketing, as I mentioned, then don't do negative marketing. It's so easy. I learned this when I didn't study marketing, man. I only studied computer science and media, what was it called? Media design or so. It's like, somehow I know more about marketing than those C-level executives. Anyway, if you don't want to have negative marketing, don't do negative marketing. It's so easy, especially with an entirely pointless move as this. With that, these were all the comments. Someone there, tired of arguing, nope, they are getting back to business. Ground, what do you mean? Run too wild, tired of arguing. Nope, they are getting back their business ground? What do you mean by that? It's hard to switch from Red Hat Enterprise Linux for now, but already discussions for next iteration to find alternative. You speak about the company you work at, I guess. Always hard to get the meaning of the short comments. Summarize what struck them was how virtual those blog posts were to their core users. Many people who use Rocky Armor at home recommend Red Hat at work. Yeah, that is what I mean. This is not a win-win situation. It's a loss-loss situation, right? It's completely pointless. It's not changing anything for everyone except it's a 101 marketing fair, right? If you study marketing and you want to learn how to not do marketing, this is the prime #1 example. How not to do marketing. If you want good PR, and thanks for the super chat, do positive stuff. And like, nobody freaking cares where and how to find your patches. Last but not least, as we have still some people and some super chats, thank you so much for that. I highly appreciate every cent donated, our Patreon and GitHub sponsors and stuff. Because last but not least, I read already from other projects, they're of Rocky Linux and so on, that they already said, yeah, it doesn't matter for us, don't care, nothing to see here, because they propose completely crazy stuff, right? So basically what they propose, among other things, in their blogs and discussions is, you know what, we will just spin up a continuous integration Red Hat VM and get the sources there, right? From any of those compute resource service providers. So it's like, and this is what I mean, it's completely pointless. People who want the sources get them, right? Even, for example, if it's mostly, I mean, I as an outsider, I totally don't get for who that is, right? Is it against Oracle? Is it against CentOS successors, Rocky Linux? And as you say, right, if you train Linux at home, you use Red Hat Enterprise Linux at work, right? So while I totally don't get who this should particularly hinder, those people who would be affected say, nothing to see, we just scale it out, we just orchestrate it into the cloud. For each package update, we spin up a continuous integration and get the source RPM out of there, and it's nothing to see. So again, last but not least, this is really now the end for this video. In the end, Red Hat has only lost reputation and marketing, and those people who want, they just get the sources anyway, because it's open source. Even if you hide it a little bit, the genie is out of the bottle there. And besides, it's not your genie, right? It's the genie created by hundreds, thousands of open source developers over the last 40, if not 50 years, if you if you count all the free software and GCC and Emacs beginnings, then it's over 40 years standing off the shoulders of other genies. And it's not yours, it never was, and it doesn't matter. And even for Oracle, like if they really wanted to, I mean, for sure Oracle has even a RedHat support subscription just because, why not? I mean, it's pocket change for them, right? It's ridiculous. So thanks again for the super chat. Thanks for the beer, and I hope you enjoyed and learned something. As always, leave the comments below, and don't forget to share, like, subscribe for all the fiddling and code and tinkering to come.